With the help of my police officer friend, I discovered my cheating wife's betrayal, but before I could get rid of her, something unexpected happened. My daughter visited me today. But it was not a pleasant experience for either of us. I don't think she left happy, although she was kind and caring. Too much time has passed, and the resentment is too deep for me to easily repay her sweetness. So why, despite her wonderful qualities, I haven't spoken to her in 5 years, all because of what her mother did. I still remember the last words I said to her at her mother's funeral 5 years ago. After an incredibly emotional day, I approached Mega at the burial site. I gathered all the bitterness that had built up inside me and told her that she was as non-existent to me as the woman we had just buried. Turning to my son Stuart, I repeated the same words, pointing my finger at his face. By the shocked expressions of those present, it was clear that my words applied to them too. The wide eyes of my family and friends will stay with me forever, as will the pain of that moment. That I will never forget. The agony of our shattered family and the death of my cheating wife weighed heavily on us on that fateful day. I made the difficult decision to walk away from it all, taking only my youngest daughter with me. When my wife, Connie, and I were celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary, I found out about the devastating betrayal. On that beautiful June day, the sun was shining brightly and our loved ones had gathered to celebrate the event. My father, who was in a wheelchair, sat at the head table with Connie's parents and our 3 children. We received congratulations and gifts from friends, neighbors, and even the mayor of the city. As a special gift from the city council, we received a plaque declaring June 14th as Connie and Mark Jenkins Day. The celebration took place under a large circus tent where over 200 people gathered, laughing, singing, and dancing until late into the night. When we renewed our vows, emotions ran high. Connie and I were very emotional, and I didn't see anyone else shed tears as we stood at the altar. I didn't notice our children beside us, or our families holding hands in the first line, or even our golden retriever Bo, who was lying silently at the preacher's feet. The only person I saw was Connie, the woman who broke my heart, and who I will love forever. It was just the two of us, bound together by love and devotion. Our daughter Megan had recently returned from her honeymoon. After getting married a month earlier, Stuart was in her sophomore year of college. So was it a joy to have everyone together again. Although I didn't say it out loud, it seemed like I missed the noise and chaos that came with having kids around. Connie seemed to feel the same. For a brief moment, our family felt close again. But a few days after our anniversary celebration, while returning the party equipment to the rental company, I accidentally crashed into a brand new Lexus. In the parking lot, I made a very sharp turn, and as a result, the Lexus headlight was damaged. Oddly enough, the police officer who filed the report was Greg, a young man who grew up with Stuart and played on several of his sports teams. Greg was taller than me, and his uniform exuded an aura of authority that matched his posture. Following his growing up made me feel almost as proud of him as I did of my own children. After we finished the paperwork, we spent a little more casual conversation. As our conversation was coming to an end, a comment from Greg gave me an idea. "Well, Mr. Jenkins," he said, reaching out to shake my hand, "I need to get back to the police station. I was so glad to see you again, and I apologize for not being able to make it to the birthday party. My parents said it was awesome there. They had the opportunity to talk to a guy I remember from Little League. He always tried to steal second base. Back then he couldn't, but now he's a man I'm proud to call my friend." He then smiled mischievously and added, "Oh, and please remind Mrs. Jenkins to be more careful at intersections. Next time, maybe I won't be so condescending." Greg's face changed to an expression of embarrassment as he noticed my confusion. Oops, I shouldn't have mentioned that. Noticing his discomfort, I tried to lighten the situation, trying to understand what he was talking about. "Don't worry, Greg. Connie doesn't always tell me when he gets a ticket. She thinks I'll be angry and take her driver's license. I wouldn't really do that, but I'll let her believe it to get the upper hand at dinner tonight." Smile. "So, what exactly did you ticket her for doing?" "Maybe I wanted to tease her a little. I'm sorry, I really shouldn't have brought it up. I don't want to get anyone in trouble. Nothing serious happened." Responds with an even wider smile. "Don't worry, it's just a joke. Could you tell me what happened?" Greg hesitated for a moment before answering. "A few weeks ago, on the 31st of last month, his wife pulled out of the parking lot of the Holiday Inn on Highway 40 and didn't see the sign for Paris. Luckily, she didn't cause any accidents or traffic problems, but she was driving pretty fast, so I had to pull her over and remind her to slow down. He paused before adding, technically, she should have been ticketed for not stopping. But since there were no consequences, I just gave her a warning. It wasn't anything serious. You did the right thing, Greg. I'll talk to her about being more careful, and maybe even tease her a little. Thanks for the warning. It was good to see you again. Sitting in my truck after unloading the chairs and tables, I thought about the conversation with Greg. This happened 2 weeks after the mega wedding on the 31st. I spent that weekend at my father's house, helping with chores that he could no longer do on his own. On Saturday, I took him to visit a nursing home to see if he would consider moving there. Although he was not at all excited about the idea, I realized I needed to try. I spent the whole Saturday with him and only returned home around 9 p.m. on Sunday. There was nothing unusual. Connie did not mention anything about Greg's fine, she said. He had spent a quiet day at home reading. I decided that Greg must have been confused because Connie would never lie to me. I pushed that thought away, thinking it was just something strange and inexplicable. A month after our wedding anniversary celebration, my sister called me saying that during her bi-weekly visit, she had found our father lying on the kitchen floor. That day, he had suffered a fall and was unable to get back into his wheelchair by himself. She assured me that he was not hurt, just confused. I immediately decided to spend Saturday with him and discuss the possibility of moving to a place where he could receive more careful. I hoped that this incident would convince him to change his mind, but my father was known for his stubbornness. Like Stuart and I were home for the summer vacation, I convinced them to go with me, playing a little with guilt. I reminded them that it had been a long time since I had seen a grandfather and that he would not be here forever. They agreed, and Coney said he wanted a quiet day to finally finish his book. Stuart talked about a girl in his philosophy class that he was interested in, and FAI shared his intention to prioritize college. Without getting distracted by boys, we started a lively conversation about their different points of view, which naturally led me to tell again the story of how his mother and I met and fell in love. My father was full of energy. The children hugged him and sat to listen to his familiar stories. We shared a meal, we talked and enjoyed tomorrow together. At noon, he fell asleep in his chair, and we decided to let him rest in silence. Hey, you two stay here and take care of Grandpa, I ordered. I will be back soon. I need to take care of that old tree in the backyard before it falls on the house. Stuart and F stayed in the living room watching TV and taking care of their grandfather while he slept. Initially, I was going home to get the chainsaw, ropes, and other tools to cut down the tree, but inexplicably, I took the highway via 40 down the hill. Suddenly, I noticed the entrance to the Holiday Inn on the other side of the road. On impulse, I turned into the motel parking lot, looking around the neighborhood. I couldn't help but notice the stop sign that Coney had ignored at the bottom of the hill. It wasn't surprising that almost no one saw it easily. Even when I was getting ready to leave the parking lot, something special caught my attention. It was a car that seemed out of place. It was Coney's car. I stopped and looked again to confirm my suspicions. There were many silver Toyotas around, but only one had a license plate with Coney's name on it. I decided to investigate further and examined the inside of the car. Everything was in order, and the doors were securely locked. I was intrigued by her unexpected presence at the Holiday Inn, especially since I had said that I wanted to spend the day relaxing with the book. I felt it was my duty to make sure she knew where her car was. First, I called the home landline, but it was disconnected on the answering machine, so I dialed your cell phone. She answered immediately. Hello, honey. How are you? She greeted me happily. I think it's strange, but I lied, something I rarely do. It's nothing special. I was just buying groceries for my dad at the market and decided to call you first. I tried on the home phone, but since you didn't answer, I called your cell phone. Where are you? She answered without hesitation. I'm at the mall. I finished my book and decided to do some shopping. I hope you don't mind. That's how she lied to me, or at least that's what it seemed to me. Don't waste money. It's for the kids' college. I answered, trying to stay calm. What time are you coming back? Probably around 6. Do you want me to make dinner? I shook my head, even though I knew she couldn't see me. No, I'm not feeling very well. Maybe I'll stay with my dad today and send the kids home. I'll let you know later, okay? Just call me when you decide, she said with a sad tone in her voice. Oh, you went to the mall alone? I asked. Expecting honesty, "Yes, I went alone. I got here a few minutes ago. I understand. I was just curious." I answered, "Well, I have to go have fun and be careful with Greg when you leave." I ended the call and hesitated, not knowing what to do next. Suddenly, a muffled scream came from the direction of the hotel. I looked around, but didn't see anything strange. There was no apparent reason for that scream. Sitting on the hood of Coney's Kemmer, I was on alert. Soon a police car arrived, and Greg got out of the car. "Mr. Jenkins, it was you who called the emergency services." "No, Greg, I didn't call." "Maybe I should talk to the manager inside," Greg suggested. "Hey, Greg, can you do me a favor?" I asked. "Sure. If you need anything," he replied. "When you come in, you can see if Mrs. Jenkins is there and who she's with." "I'll wait here." Greg hesitated for a moment before saying, "Okay, wait." "Oh no, I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins. I'll be right back. I'll find out what's going on and talk to you later." He seemed visibly nervous as he apologized. Greg got back in the car and drove up to the entrance, leaving me waiting anxiously, but nothing happened for a long time. Eventually, I heard the distant sound of a siren. The noise grew louder until it stopped at the entrance of the motel. The paramedics quickly got out and loaded someone into the ambulance. Greg came up to me with a serious expression on his face. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins," he said. "There's been an incident inside. Your wife has been taken to the city hospital by ambulance. She tried to run through the sliding glass door. Fortunately, she didn't crash into it, but she suffered severe bruising and a cut above her eye. She is also very shaken." The man who was with her left as soon as the ambulance arrived. I have his details and account of the incident, but I can't release them now. However, you can. Go to the police station tomorrow and request this information under the Freedom of Information Act. He paused before continuing, "Once more, I'm so sorry. You and Mrs. Jenkins are very dear to me, like family." He reached out to shake hands, but I didn't have time to react. Anger got the better of me. It was only after he had gone that I somehow managed to find my way back to my father's house. I stood in the driveway in shock. What happened? The children asked. I couldn't find the words to explain there. Concern grew as I fought back the tears. My children rarely saw me so vulnerable. And when I finally did, I broke down. Stewart couldn't contain his own emotions. In a moment of sincerity, I told them that his mother was in the hospital and that they needed to go there without further explanation. They quickly packed their things and left. I handed the keys to Stewart, knowing that I wouldn't be able to go with them. "I'm going to spend the night here," I said. They looked at me with concern before leaving. After making sure that my father was okay, I collapsed on the couch. My heart was beating fast and sadness overcame me, and my gaze was fixed on the floor. My father sat down next to me and asked, "What's on your mind, Mark? What's bothering you?" I've never been able to open up to my father about personal matters. He was old-fashioned and always kept his feelings to himself. In that regard, I had followed his example. When I faced difficulties in childhood, he would just say, "Behave like a man and everything will be fine." I expected to hear the same advice as always, so I remained silent. But he took me by surprise. He started telling me a story about him and my mother, something he had never told me, my sister, or anyone else. "After you were born, I went through a difficult situation at work. Her mother wanted an expensive red dress, but I didn't have the money to buy it. In desperation, I resorted to stealing a tool and selling it. Unfortunately, I was caught." She paused before continuing. "In the end, I managed to return the stolen items. I was fired and turned over to the police, but that was just the beginning. I was sentenced to a year in prison, but the real ordeal was dealing with her mother's anger and frustration, which came down on me like a ton of bricks. Our marriage hung on the brink for what seemed like an eternity. She was cold and distant to me, but one day she surprised me. She mentioned a job opening near where she worked. She encouraged me to go to the interview the next morning. Then she hugged me. She looked into my eyes and said 3 strong words. "I forgive you." She showed me mercy and forgave me even after I almost destroyed our marriage. She put her pride aside and allowed me back into her heart. From that day on, everything I did was to make her proud. Until the day she left us. Her love made me a better man, despite the pain she felt in the beginning. In the end, She was much more compassionate and understanding than I was. Together, we overcame the suffering, and we move on. Mark, it seems like you are going through something similar to what Vivi did. Maybe you need forgiveness. Or maybe it is hard to forgive someone like your mother. Maybe the situation is so complicated that forgiveness seems impossible. Either way, I believe that in the end, you will make the right decision. I pray that everything works out in the best possible way. Maybe I don't say this often, but I am immensely proud of the man you have become. I love you so much, son. We hugged for a while. These words made me feel a little better. We had dinner and went to bed, but I could hardly sleep that night. In the morning, when I had managed to fall asleep, the phone rang, interrupted both on the landline and on the cell phone, but I decided not to answer it. I spent the weekend with my father and talked to Mega Stewart on the phone. I avoided talking to Coney. When she tried to get in touch, I was not ready for her to see or hear me in the state I was in. When Monday came, I called work and told them that I was dealing with family issues and would need to take a few days off. I didn't know all the details of what had happened, but it seemed like my children knew more than I did. There was one thing I was sure of, though. I didn't want to find out any more. I was sitting in the backyard when I heard a familiar voice. "Hi, Mark," Coney said. Her voice instantly pulled me out of my thoughts and stirred a flood of emotions. Without turning to look, I greeted Coney in a low tone. She came over and placed a chair in front of me. With a tone of regret, she murmured, "I'm sorry, Mark." I looked at her hands. Her arms, once so beautiful and strong, now showed signs of injury. One of them had a bruise on the other, a large cut. When I finally looked up at her face, I saw the bandages holding her broken nose together and a large gauze covering one of her eyes, hiding the stitches. The other eye was surrounded by a huge bruise, a mixture of black and orange tones. It looked like a train wreck. Once so beautiful, she now looked unrecognizable. I wondered if my perception was distorted by the pain she was feeling, or if she really was that hurt. "Mark, I came here to apologize." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I know that just apologizing may not be enough to fix what's broken between us, but it is all I have." She paused and looked down. "Mega brought me here because I'm still too weak to drive alone. I needed to see you, talk to you, make you understand why I did what I did to you with our relationship. See, I made a mistake, and I take full responsibility for it. It wasn't your fault. You don't deserve the pain I caused." She swallowed hard before continuing. "The pain I caused you is a huge weight on my heart, maybe even bigger, because I caused the suffering. I feel it's a consequence of my own actions. This could destroy something that is incredibly important to me. I don't know if I want to hear your side of the story." I answered what I already knew was causing me unbearable pain. "I can't take it anymore. Please just stop talking. But Mark, if you find the strength in your heart to forgive me, maybe we can save our relationship. I can't accept losing you. I love you, and I need you to understand why I made this decision. It all started when I said I don't want to hear it. But Mark, please listen to me. This is the only way we can move on and rebuild our family. Please, Mark, just listen to me." I already said no. I got up from the chair and left, leaving her there in tears, the bruises still marking her face. "Dad, please just listen to her." Mega followed me to the kitchen, pleading. "She just wants to explain everything and apologize so we can forget this once and for all." I turned to my oldest daughter, feeling anger bubbling inside me. I let out the words that sealed my fate. "Mega, if you believe that I know her side will fix our relationship, then you are as wrong as she is." I needed to get it off my chest. "Write a letter and send it to me. I can't stand to hear her justify how she destroyed our 25-year marriage and how she destroyed me in the process. I can't be with her now. I can't forgive her." I got in the car and drove aimlessly, not knowing where I was going or if I would ever come back. I just needed to get away and clear my mind. The next morning, when I got back to my father's house, Pete greeted me with a warm smile at the door. Her hug and energy instantly brightened my spirit. At that moment, her smile was like a beacon of hope in the midst of the darkness that surrounded me. She made me believe that happiness was still possible. That one day I could feel joy again, but I still didn't know if my decision would bring happiness to others. My father was also happy to see me during dinner. I shared my decision with him, and with FAI, I decided to move here for a while. I announced I need a space away from everything, and you might need help with the cooking and cleaning, Dad, because besides scrambled eggs and bacon, you don't know how to make anything else. FA smiled. FAI, can you help me get some things at home? I asked her. I can't see your mother right now, but I need some things for work. Let everyone know that I'll be staying here temporarily until I find a more definitive solution. If your mother asks, just say I'll stay here. Simple, no details. Okay, I'll come back tonight. I'll bring everything you need. Dad, give me a list of the things you need. Is there anything else I should tell my mother? Tell her I'm going to live here and ask her not to contact me. When I'm ready, I'll look for her. I gave her the list, and then I spent the rest of the night discussing our new situation with my father. From the look on his face, it was clear he was happy to see me back, but worried with the current situation. He didn't mention Coney or the recent events. We even did something we hadn't done in a long time. We played a game of checkers. Naturally, he came out victorious. When he came back with our things, I was surprised at how full her car was. I brought my things too, she said firmly. I'm going to stay in the guest room until school starts. With a determined look, she helped me unload the things at night. I asked what had happened. FA seemed upset when she started talking. Can you imagine what my sister said? She exclaimed she thinks you're being childish and that you should go home and make up with Mom. And Stuart was no better. He argued that infidelity is inevitable in a relationship and that it's not a serious problem. He even advised her to forgive my mother and find a girlfriend to distract herself. Can you believe their audacity? Said FAI, incredulous. Unbelievable. FAI, I don't want to hear this. It's not your fault, but they're making you the villain. They think you should apologize and try to make things right. It was Mom who made the mistake. After I got my things, I packed them and put them in the car. I was beside herself with anger. I knew that if she made a decision, it wouldn't be easy to change it. I remained silent, letting her anger cool down. Over the next few months, I tried to behave as normally as possible. I went to work, helped with the housework, and even taught how to make a delicious vegetable lasagna every now and then. Megan or Stuart would call me asking if I was coming back. In my head, I pictured Coney anxiously waiting for an answer. I told them I was going to stay with my father, and I didn't want to discuss Coney or communicate with her despite their attempts to talk about it. I simply stopped answering. One day, Stuart appeared at the door and insisted that he had important news to share with me. We sat on the terrace so he could tell me. Dad, you need to come home, he said. It's been 2 months and Mom's condition has gotten worse. I have to go back to college soon, and I can't leave Megan alone to take care of her. We are all worried about Mom's well-being. When none of us are around, she cries all the time. She barely sleeps. She barely eats, which has led to significant weight loss. Even some of her friends who have visited her are as concerned as we are. She just sits home and whines despite our attempts to get her to eat or go to the store. She breaks down in tears again. Dad, I think you have punished enough. It is time to let go of the grudge and come home. Mommy is sorry, and you are hurting too. It is time to move on and be reunited with your family. When I looked at my son, these thoughts haunted me. This is the same boy I encouraged in baseball and football, and under whose guidance he earned his Eagle badge in scouting. But he has changed. He no longer seems like the son who made me proud of his accomplishments and decisions. His values have changed, and now he believes his mother's actions are acceptable, which sets a disturbing precedent for his own behavior. I have always stressed the importance of keeping promises to my children and have tried to instill in them strong moral principles in both words and actions. But I have failed. I believed Stuart was acting crazy. Stuart, you are an adult now. Let's talk like men. Get out of my house. How dare you accuse me of maturity? I haven't messed up anything. If you support your mother's actions, then you have really changed for the worse. Go and take care of her and leave me alone. I will stay here until I am ready to move on with my life. Now go away before I make you leave. I got up and went into the house. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of a car driving away. At the end of August, I went back to college. There was no news from Megan or Stuart. I thought Stuart was back at college too, and Megan was busy dividing her time between her new husband and Coney. They didn't contact me anymore. Now it was just my father. In the middle of September, a letter arrived from Coney telling Megan to write whatever she wanted to ease her conscience. But now with the letter in my hands, I couldn't bring myself to read it. The pain was still too great for me. I pushed those thoughts away and focused on moving on with my life. I would call regularly to see how my father and I were doing, and would mention that I also spoke to Meg and Stuart, who were all supportive of their own mother. Dad said he would come to my birthday party at the end of October and expressed the hope that by then I would have made a decision about our future. I knew that indecision was not good for anyone, so I promised her that we would meet once I made a decision. On October 30th, I celebrated my 5th birthday. A significant event arrived this morning with good news. She wanted to invite my father and I to an Italian dinner to celebrate the occasion. She joked with me that she would finally try real lasagna, making fun of my lack of culinary skills. Her light-hearted joke was the first one that had made me smile in months. After a delicious lunch, we returned home late and I helped my father to bed. Then I went into the living room with a fan. I handed him a beer and we sat down at the table for a heart-to-heart talk. "Well, Dad, have you decided what you're going to do?" "Dad." She got straight to the point, always preferring directness. I sighed deeply and began to explain. I realized that I do not have all the answers, especially when it comes to understanding her actions, avoiding her, and refusing to let me know. Communicating won't solve anything. I finally read the letter she wrote, but I'm skeptical about the veracity of the content, although the possibility that it could be true seems very unlikely. Furthermore, given the length of the situation, I don't think a reconciliation is possible. However, it's important for me to talk to her, hear her point of view, and express my own feelings. I can't trust her anymore. Divorce is the only acceptable option. It seems that I was just as unhappy without her as she was without me. As you said, I'm ready to move on, whatever that means for us. I plan on calling her tomorrow. Her cell phone rang suddenly, cutting her off mid-sentence. Although I didn't finish what I wanted to say, I let her answer the call. "It's Mega," she informed me by looking at the phone screen. She then left to answer the call. A few minutes later she came back, visibly unbalanced and pale. Her eyes were wide with fear. She looked around the room and then collapsed into my arms, crying uncontrollably. I held her close, trying to comfort her as she cried on my shoulder, hoping she would change. Calmed down after a few minutes, she pulled away. She wiped her tears and looked at me with a serious expression on her face. "Dad, Mommy died," she whispered. "Mega found her lifeless body in the bathroom last night. It seems she took a large dose of sleeping pills." Mega didn't give any more details. What interested me most was the question of my participation in Connie's decision to take those pills. I didn't physically force her to swallow, but my silence aggravated her emotional suffering. I was consumed by my own pain, and I wanted her to understand the depth of my suffering despite the love I still felt for her. Her act hurt me to the core. I never wanted her to die. I just wanted her to understand my pain. Maybe she did, but it was too hard for her. Now I will never know the truth about her actions, her betrayal destroying our marriage, and my actions may have contributed to her destroying herself. Connie's funeral will be tomorrow, and I will have to be strong and endure it in front of our loved ones and say goodbye to her. Sometime later, I was sitting in an armchair in the garden when I heard a loud knock on the door. It was Mega. She came closer to me, and I asked, "Mega, are you okay?" I whispered worriedly. She shook her head. We sat in silence, taking in the sounds of the night. Mega looked at me and said softly, "You know, none of this would have happened if you had come home and forgiven her. She made a mistake. I'm sure you made mistakes too, and she forgave you. She couldn't live without you." Her pride shattered her. Her words hit me like a rock. My own daughter accused me of being responsible for my wife's death. No matter how much I tried to explain, it wasn't my fault. I didn't have an affair. I didn't cheat on our friends or family. For months, I didn't take sleeping pills to numb the guilt. Dad, tomorrow will be a hard day. After the funeral, everyone will be back at our house. And there will be a lot of people there. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go to the funeral if you don't want to. Stuart and Mom's friends will take care of everything. So don't worry. Mega didn't seem to want to see me at the funeral. I couldn't understand. Maybe I was too overwhelmed with emotions and stressed to see clearly what was going on. But one thing I knew for sure, I didn't want to argue with my daughter on the eve of his mother's funeral. Without saying a word, I got up from my seat, went into the house, and went to my room to try to sleep the next day. I quickly gathered all my bedding, put it in the laundry basket, and then got dressed in a suit and tie. When I went downstairs, I saw that FAI was already dressed and waiting for me in the living room. My father looked exhausted, and I realized that the upcoming funeral was weighing on all of us. Father came to me and straightened my tie, just as his mother had done countless times in the past. I kissed her on the forehead. I took her hand, and we walked out to the waiting limousine. Father held my hand tightly the entire time and remained silent with his head down. When we arrived at the funeral home, we were greeted in the lobby by a group of friends. As we entered the examination room, all eyes were on me. But instead of sympathy from our friends and neighbors, I noticed an expression of contempt and disdain on their faces. When I greeted some people with a nod, they immediately turned their attention to talking to others. My boss at work extended his hand and expressed his condolences. Condolences, and the others around him used the same hostile pressures. He was the only one who spoke to me. The children received sympathetic looks from those I had been to. I was confused. Funerals were an unfamiliar topic to me, as the only funerals I had attended were my mother's, and they weren't like this. FA walked me to the casket, where we knelt to say goodbye. The soft sounds of the organ filled the room, but the whispers of the crowd still reached our ears. As I prayed silently, I could hear the harsh murmurs. The channel relentless. He left her. It happened because of him. The hypo son of a underscore. She's dead because of him. FAI squeezed my hand tightly, sharing the pain of the cruel words we heard. The funeral was emotional. Instead of the usual funeral music, a beautiful hymn played which Coney loved. To my surprise, Coney's friends didn't recognize me or FAI. After talking to Megan Stewart, several friends shared their memories, and at the end Megan made a plea for mercy and forgiveness, drawing parallels to Jesus' forgiveness those who crucified him. The atmosphere in the cemetery was somber and calm as we listened to the preacher's last words. When the service ended, we each placed a red rose on Cone's coffin. I was the first, followed by FAI. Megan and Stuart, my father's friend, also walked him to the coffin. Before we left, feeling overwhelmed with emotions I could no longer hold it in, and confronted Mega and Stuart. I angrily stated that due to their actions spreading lies and exposing me in a negative light, I felt betrayed. I expressed my feelings in front of everyone before leaving with FAI and ordering the limo driver to drive away quickly. I left Megan and Stuart standing by the side of the road. Only a small group of people attended the gathering. After we said our goodbyes, including my boss's wife and two neighbors, Mega and Stuart leaned on each other at Mega's house. It was later revealed that many people thought I was responsible for Coney's death, which made them see me as the culprit. FAI went back to college, leaving me alone. Their visits were a bright spot in my lonely days. Megan was busy with her in-laws. Stuart was often away at college or on vacation, somewhere to deal with grief. I threw myself into work. I would often wake up in the middle of the night, tormented by memories of my late wife Coney and her affair with John Jablonski, a former neighbor, who even attended our 25th wedding anniversary celebration. Over time, the pain eased a bit. Megan decided to name her children Coney and TN, but I have yet to see them. Stuart married his college sweetheart, but unfortunately followed in his mother's footsteps. He attracted and eventually divorced her. They have since moved to California, and after the funeral, I lost touch with her. She is the only one who still keeps me informed about their lives. They are still my children. My boss at work has been a great source of support for me, giving me the space I needed and encouraging my growth at the same time. Thanks to her leadership, I was promoted to senior manager in Florida. I moved to Orlando. I sold my old house and started my life over to help my dog Good adjust without any problems. I bought him a companion. Our new life in the new house is going well. Unfortunately, I have lost touch with most of my friends from Maryland. Only a few still contact me, but none of them invite me to talk. After my father passed away a year after Coney, it was just me and FAI left in the house. FAI graduated from college with top honors and got a great job in Florida. She is living with me now, and I am in no rush to leave. It has been a difficult few years, during which I have lost almost everything except FAI. In order not to feel like a lonely old man with only my dogs for companions, I have returned to writing, a hobby that I had long neglected. Whereas before I had written only business reports, recently I have returned to writing short stories and have even managed to sell a few. One night, the idea for a story turned into a piece of writing that described a difficult period in my life. Despite the emotional difficulties associated with returning to painful memories, the writing process turned out to be therapeutic. When I finished the draft, I decided to keep it a secret and hide it in my office. To improve my writing skills, I enrolled in creative writing courses at the nearest community college. Although most of my classmates were younger and less experienced, I became close with two other older students, finding camaraderie in our shared passion by writing stories. Morris talked about how his family had been involved in the Civil War, and Alicia, a widowed mother of 5, moved to Florida to start over and began exploring new interests, attending college classes. During the conversation, Alicia and I found a lot in common. It has been almost 30 years since my last meeting, and I have been concentrating on Alicia, taking mental notes as she shares her thoughts and experiences, finding that she is dominating the conversation. She asked about my biography and why I ended up in Central Florida alone, taking writing courses at a community college. Telling my story briefly, hoping to divert attention to her, was unsuccessful. She kept asking questions. Her curiosity was persistent, which led me to invite her to dinner at my house the following Saturday. I told her that if she wanted to know more about me, she should come. In response, she smiled warmly and beautifully, agreeing, saying yes, with pleasure, I have to say. The dinner was simply wonderful, he commented, as we walked out onto the patio, breathing in the cool evening breeze under the swaying palm trees. Not many men can make a vegetable lasagna as delicious as this one. What other surprises do you have? I have it up my sleeve. I am responsible for the distribution center of the East Region products industry. My daughter Fa lives with me. Unfortunately, my wife passed away a little over 5 years ago. I have 2 other children. And have you met my favorite wet Verdourdos? Look, that's all I said. Actually, you have to admit, I can be a little boring. Sometimes nothing interesting happens in my life. You promised to share your story if I came to dinner, Alicia teased. So just talk. I'm waiting for all the juicy details. Instead of answering, I got up and went into the house. When I came back, I had a box with my novel in my hands that described the most significant events of my life. I had been writing for several years, and I sold some stories to a local literary magazine. My computer is full of stories, some inspired by my own experiences, others taken from my imagination. Before I enrolled in creative writing courses, I wrote a paper that I didn't know what to do with. Inside that box is a dark narrative about my family and myself. Writing this book served as a form of therapy for me, helping me deal with the pain of losing my wife and breaking up my family. I'm keeping it to myself for now, but I'm interested in hearing your opinion, although I believe that this may serve only as an improvised knock on the door on cloudy nights. The point of view of the writer that I admire is very important to me. Admiration looked into her eyes, and she replied, it would be an honor for me to read your work. What is the name? I replied, Whether Friends. Wow, it is so heavy, she exclaimed, taking the book from my hands. It is only 987 pages. I am interested in hearing your thoughts. Please be honest, even if it is rude. The point of view of another person is important to me. I would not like to share this book with my daughter due to possible painful memories. Mark, I would love to read your story and give you my honest opinion. I had to warn you that I am very biased and tend to express my opinion openly. I will start reading tomorrow, she added. During the conversation, we touched on topics such as writing classes, the vibrant nightlife in Florida for people our age, and we also shared thoughts about our favorite movies. The evening was lovely, and the weather in Florida was surprisingly pleasant. For the first time when I walked her to the car, she surprised me with a sweet kiss on the cheek, which made me feel young and excited. As I put things away after dinner, I couldn't help but think about how we spent our time together. Alice was absent from the next class, and after our memorable dinner, I didn't hear from her again. I began to wonder if my request for her to proofread my book had given the impression that I was crazy and best avoided. I was thinking about contacting her, but didn't want to seem pushy. 2 weeks later, she called me while I was out and left a message on my answering machine. Hi, this is Alice. I'd like you to come over for dinner on Friday night. My son is staying with me for a few days, and I think it's time you two got to know each other. I might have a surprise for you, so bring a few bottles of that delicious white wine we both enjoyed last time, and come by at 7 o'clock. Please call me when you get a chance. See you later for our Friday date. I chose a casual but stylish outfit and brought 2 bottles of a Blazer Reserve, a wine I had read about in a local Orlando magazine that said it was one of the best white wines of the year. Since I didn't know much about wine, I decided to take the author's word for it. The wine went well with the wine we had for dinner, and I was hoping it would complement what Alice had prepared. "Hello, Mark, welcome," and Alicia greeted me warmly, giving me a tour of her home. When we arrived on the terrace, I noticed a cozy table set for 3. With candles and wine glasses, a man appeared from behind 2 orange trees and joined us at the dining table. "Mark, this is my son Bury," she said. "Bury." He extended his hand and greeted me with a smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mark Jenkins." My mother spoke very highly of you. "She's not easy to impress." "Then you must be something special." "Nice to meet you too, Bury," I replied. "I must admit that the stories Alicia can share with you are probably the product of our creative writing classes." "There's nothing particularly exciting about me," I said. Alicia laughed and walked over to the table, picking up the bottles of wine to chill them while we sat down. As soon as she joined us, she gave me a beaming smile again and took my hand. "Mark, I have to admit, I lured you here under false pretenses," she said. "Let's have lunch when the wine is ready. But first, I need to share some interesting news with you. It may be a surprise for you. I hope a good surprise." I was full of curiosity and at the same time very nervous. "Mark, my son is here today to meet you. I took a chance on doing something that you might not have approved if I had asked you first. But I went ahead, and now it's too late to cancel it. Anything if you get upset. So be it. That's what happened. I read your book in just 2 days, and it completely captivated me. I was totally absorbed by your story, Mark. It's incredibly inspiring and deeply moving. I couldn't put it down. Once I got halfway through, tears came to my eyes when I read about the hardships you faced, especially the chapter where you went to live with your father after your wife's revelation. The part dedicated to your children also made me cry. Your book is truly wonderful, one of the best I have ever come across. It touched me so much that I decided to share it with my son. Despite his usual reluctance to read books by unknown authors, he willingly picked up the book on my recommendation. He was as enamored with the book as I was, and even offered to help edit it so we could move forward with publishing. Isn't that amazing? I didn't speak or move. I looked at her and smiled back. I probably looked stupid, but I couldn't help it. Bury could tell and smiled, repeating her mother's words. Mom was right. Mr. Jenkins, this is truly the best debut novel I have ever come across, and I have come across many during my time at Prince Press in New York. I keep track of submissions from new authors, and each month we receive about 100 books. After reviewing them, I pass them on to 2 other reviewers. If we agree that your book is great, we will be happy to help edit it and prepare it for publication. Do you want to publish your book? Congratulations on creating such an exceptional work that we believe will be a success. I was shocked and speechless by this news. She smiled warmly at me. Alicia gave me a soft kiss on the forehead and went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. When we sat down to eat, our conversation turned to my book. At times, emotions ran high. We sipped on maize and peach coeur as we discussed the publishing process, promotion strategies, and possible royalties. I realized that I wasn't going to make any money from this, but it was still exciting. Bury went to bed. My head was spinning. Alicia and I were sitting outside finishing our wine and indulging in fantasies about becoming famous writers like Stephen King or J.K. Rowling. It was a pleasant evening, although deep down I knew it was just a fantasy. When the clock struck midnight, I decided to leave. Alicia walked me to my car and gave me a passionate kiss that rekindled a flame in me. It had been a long time since I had felt so alive. This feeling, it reminded me of the past with Coney. Despite the sweet and bitter memories, the excitement of the drive back home brought a sense of joy to my heart. Over the next 3 months, I collaborated with the editor at Prentice PR, finalizing my manuscript. Our interaction included a face-to-face meeting, as well as several emails and phone calls. We first transferred my draft from MSW to a more complex editing program. After completing the manuscript, I received a hard copy, which I worked on over the weekend. As my editor had predicted, I was constantly finding small improvements to perfect every detail. During the day, I continued to work at Fosse Industries, and in the evenings, I dedicated myself to writing the novel. And I was always so supportive. I took care of myself like a mother. I made sure I stayed healthy and kept me updated on the latest developments. Alicia came to me on the weekends to help with my work. When my book was published on May 1st, I was contractually obligated to do several book signings all over the country, including in my hometown of El Paso, Maryland. Just thinking about it made me anxious. I took 3 weeks off work to embark on a book tour. Although being an author seemed glamorous, the experience was actually quite exhausting. After spending 28 days traveling by plane and train to different cities, staying in short-stay hotels, and attending non-stop book exhibitions where I chatted with fans, I found myself completely exhausted from the constant traveling. But Alicia's unexpected presence at 2 book signings brought me new pleasure. She played the role of a shy fan, and I played the role of a charming author. She stayed with me. The last stop on the tour was in my hometown of El Paso. I asked for it to be the grand finale, and I was grateful to the organizers for arranging this. I knew the bookstore well, which was only a few miles from my childhood home. The event was scheduled from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. When I arrived, I noticed that a crowd had already gathered, including several familiar faces, such as my former boss and his wife. They were sitting at a table with about 50 copies of my book, all displayed on a large poster with my image. When I saw them, I immediately hugged them. We exchanged contact information and planned to meet again for dinner. Their presence gave me great joy, making me forget for a moment the growing line of people behind them. After signing their books and having a few quick conversations, I greeted the other participants with smiles and even posed for a few surprising photos. The event turned out to be more enjoyable than I expected. About half an hour into the event, an old friend who had drifted away from me after Coney's funeral approached me with my book in his hands. I signed the book and gave him a friendly handshake. He then silently apologized, admitting that he didn't understand. Until he read my book, this scenario repeated itself throughout the year. Day with other old friends who also expressed regret for past mistakes, leaving me with feelings of gratitude and embarrassment. What struck me the most was the moment when Leonard Jablonski approached me. With a worried look, she apologized for the difficulties we had been through and told me that she had divorced John, who had caused her a lot of pain. She also mentioned that she is now engaged to another man and admitted that she had spread a rumor that I was seeking revenge, and that was why JN had moved abroad. Not knowing how to react, I ended up writing a message of peace and recognition in her book, after which we hugged briefly until she walked away. Even after the official end of the event, people continued in line. Out of nowhere, my gaze fell on Mega, who was standing near the bookshelves watching in silence what was happening. She stayed where she was and disappeared when I finished signing the next book. The last one in line was FAI, who hugged me warmly, and we talked on the way back to my hotel, not for the holiday. And during the car ride, the conversation turned to Alicia. Expressed her sympathy for Alicia and hoped I would feel the same as I confessed my love for her. Upon hearing this, I broke down in tears on my shoulder. As we arrived, a police car with its lights flashing pulled up in front of the hotel. Sergeant Greg got out and came over to us. We met like old friends who hadn't seen each other in a long time. I handed him a copy of my book and a note expressing how much he meant to me. Greg had to leave for work and FA, and I went to dinner. The drive home turned out to be surprisingly less stressful than I had imagined. The next unexpected encounter happened a few days later with Mega on my doorstep. Alicia and I were just discussing the success of my book, which had reached number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. But all thoughts of the book disappeared when I saw my daughter. "Hi, Dad, how are you?" she asked with a hint of shyness in her voice. "Hi, Megan, I'm fine. What brings you here?" I asked, surprised. "I came here for work and was in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd stop by and see how you were doing," Mega replied. At that moment, I felt Alice's hand on my shoulder, and I turned to see her standing next to me. "Would you like to introduce myself?" "Check," she said with a tone of authority in Alicia's voice. "This is my daughter, Megan," I replied. Alicia walked past me and gave Mega a warm hug. "I heard so much about you." When they entered the living room, the two Women completely ignored me. They sat at the table and started talking animatedly for an hour, leaving me to clean the kitchen and do other household chores. As I walked past the room several times, while cleaning, they continued to talk and laugh enthusiastically. Alice admired the photos of Mega's children, which she eventually showed Alicia, invited me to join them in the living room. "Come on, Mark, join us," she said in a way that I took as an order. I walked over and sat next to her where she took my hand. I was forced to stay there, not motivated by affection, but given the situation. Megan's gaze fell on our intertwined hands. The silence that followed seemed awkward. Finally, Alicia broke attention. "Since neither of you are talking, I will speak," she said determinedly. "Mark, Megan is here because she has something to tell you. I knew you wouldn't invite her, so I took the liberty. This can be your house, but if you want me to stay here as a guest, you will sit quietly and listen to what she has to say." My gaze alternated between Megan and Alicia. Surrounded by them, I decided to refrain from escalating the situation. I sat down in my chair and braced myself. "Dad, I came here with sincere concern for your well-being." I was sincere. "I also wanted to apologize to you, Dad. I was wrong about many things, especially about you. I used to blame you for everything that happened to Mom Stewart and me back then. I only saw part of the picture. It was only when I read your book that I began to better understand what was happening from your point of view. After reading your words and realizing the extent of the pain you endured, I felt a deep sense of stupidity. Even though I was already a grown woman with my own family, I realized that you still saw me as your innocent little girl. I always had great respect for my mother. Even after the hurtful things she did to you, you always seemed strong and resilient. But now I see that it was a facade that hid your emotions. Mom managed to break through that shield and cause more damage than I could ever imagine. I believed that if you could find the strength to forgive her and come home, everything would be okay, but I didn't realize that your strength was manifested in her decision to leave a relationship that had lasted over 25 years to protect us from her mistakes. While Megan was in tears, I was overcome with remorse, and Alice waited for my answer. I decided to think a little before giving an answer. "Mega. And as for Stuart, what does Stuart think of me? He knows about your visit." Megan replied, "Stuart is not doing so well. Mom's actions caused him the greatest pain. After Laura found out about his infidelity and filed for divorce, he moved to California and began leading an irresponsible life. He quickly went from one relationship to another. He even got into an affair with a married woman and faced the consequences from her husband, which eventually forced him to leave town. Despite his behavior, Stuart remains indifferent to the seriousness of the betrayal. He doesn't know I'm here, and I don't care what he thinks." Mega's sudden outburst left me little time to decide what to do next, so I decided to wait again. "Megan, what are your plans? Are you staying in town? Do you have a place to stay?" "I'm going to stay at FAI's house for a few days to see her new apartment, and then I'm going home. I'll think about everything you said today and inform her of my decision. This is the best thing I can offer right now, Daddy. I didn't even expect this. Thank you. I'm going to FAI's house." "Alicia, it was a pleasure to finally meet you. I hope to see you again soon. Take good care of my dad for me." Megan left as quickly as she arrived. I had a lot on my mind, and I found comfort in the fact that Alice was not allowing me to act on impulse. After a Caribbean cruise donated by the press in honor of the success of our book, Alicia and I went to Maryland. This trip was very important because it gave me the opportunity to meet my two young grandchildren aged 2 and 4, and to show Alicia my hometown. Alicia, who has now become a grandmother, provided us with invaluable support during the trip, especially during difficult times. The most memorable moment of the trip was during a family dinner at Mega's house, when I announced my engagement, which had been decided during the cruise. FAI is already busy planning the wedding. We are looking forward to sharing our news with Alicia's children. Looking back, Alicia and I assess how our lives have developed from youthful aspirations to a reality full of love and new beginnings. After 25 years living with Coney, I'm looking forward to starting an exciting new chapter of my life with Alicia, which can serve as an impetus to write a new book, only this time a romance with a happy ending. And that was today's Reddit story. What did you think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching so far. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and also check out the videos.